Okay, we're live? Excellent. All right, shalom, everyone. Shalom. All right, so we're here for our weekly Torah study. The sound echoes a lot differently when there's not a room completely filled with people. All right, awesome. All right, well, I want to first thank Rabbi Tom for last week. He did an excellent job, and I heard him mention a few times that if he didn't, I might fire him, so you're not fired. Okay, so you're not fired. I did watch the entire thing, and you did a good job. Good job. So you're not fired, and so you can step in again the next time I need you, and you'll be okay. All right. So tonight we're going to go through our weekly Torah portion as we do every week. And for those of you on the live stream, welcome. This is a Beth Shalom MTOI sponsored event. It is not, excuse me, I still have the cough. It is not a forum for you to kind of go in any direction you want to go. We're going to do this as we do this as a way of reaching out to everyone, but especially also those that are connected with us virtually through the internet. And so we do ask that those of you that are visiting and guests and checking us out, that you please be respectful. We do want you to be here. We'd love you to be a part of what we're doing, but we also just wanted to make sure that you're being respectful of what we are doing, which is having a Torah study. And please allow the questions to be answered by those of us here in the leadership. Okay, so if someone is posting questions online, they're not there for you to answer. Now, when we have the interactive discussion, you'll be able to put in, some questions and comments that could be read out loud, and we'll do that interactively. But this is a group-sponsored thing, just so we'll be respectful. Okay. All right, so the way this is going to work is we're going to start off with some prayer time just to see if anybody has any prayer needs, any praise and prayer requests that we need to deal with, as well as then we're going to go ahead and read the Torah portion. After reading it, we'll have a few announcements, and then we'll go ahead and discuss the Torah portion. I'll also probably mention those announcements briefly at the beginning as well, just to make sure some people that might be here at the beginning who might not be here all the way through the study, okay? All right, that being said, let's go ahead and begin with any praise or prayers that people may have. And we'll begin with Rabbi Tom.
Thank you. Joanne is on her way to Calhoun. Ariel called, and Ethan's van is broke down. They're stranded in the heat, so she's going to rescue them. And we pray that she'll have a safe journey and a safe journey back. And also I have a special unspoken request for some family members who are supposed to come down here in August, and pray that Yahweh will open the doors according to his will.
Amen. We're going to make Kirk run back and forth today. All right, anybody else? Okay, coming around. Okay, Sarah Beth.
So yesterday was 2 years since coming to Tennessee.
Hey!
Really grateful for Abba for everything he put me through leading up to getting here and everything he's put me through since. Understatement, he's kind of awesome. And then to go with that, prayer that he would bring peace to the relationships that I lost choosing this walk. And then prayer, Thursday is my 30-day evaluation.
Okay, amen. Wow, 2 years already, huh? Time does fly. All right, anybody else? Okay, bring it back. Mandy, do we have any on the live stream?
April, praise report, my health issues are getting better. Kevin and Rhonda have some unspoken prayers. I know there's a delay, but there's actually really none more than that.
Okay,
so far.
no problem.
Oh, prayer request, Angelique Ewing. Prayer request for her mom's health. She's planning to move back to Washington next month. She hasn't seen her in 13 years, and she has to be well enough to travel home.
Wow. Amen.
Early, prayer for daily sales and business to grow and fellowship with his brothers. Linda, prayer for her dear sister, son-in-law. She was injured while training for polio. Michael Diaz, prayer for Puerto Rico. Lots of protest violence. May Abba take control and do what serves his purpose. Aaron Sullivan, praise my dad's surgery went well today and he is recovering at home. Prayer, local family lost 3 of their 4 children, 1, 4, and 12 in a house fire this week. Laura Powell, praise vision therapy was approved. Prayer for her son, Chris, having migraines. He's 32 and also has seizures. And Anna, unspoken. And that's what I have so far.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started then. And why don't you go ahead and open us and also open us with prayer, since you have the mic.
Father, we thank you and we praise you. We come together acknowledging that you are our Father, our King, our Creator. Thank you for this time that we have. Thank you for the privilege of being here and being able to study your word. Thank you for your Torah. Thank you for this family. Thank you for this ministry, Father. I truly am blessed and grateful and thankful that we can reach out to so many people, that we can come together today as a family to study your Torah, to study your word, to put it and write it in our hearts, to spend time with our teacher as we ask questions and seek your word. Father, I thank you and I praise you in Yeshua's name. Amen.
Amen, amen. Okay, so, excuse me, we could pray for this cough to finally go away. All right, so tonight, I just want to give a couple of quick announcements, then we'll get into the Torah portion. Tonight's Torah portion is Balak, okay? And that means Balak. Okay, no. Okay, we're dealing with someone's name, someone who's named Balak, and it's a key figure in the sections we're going to read today. And it's a very important section, as they all are, and we'll see some really important lessons here. Just some reminders that, we do have, for those of you that are on live stream, we do have Shabbat services that we live stream every week. Also a reminder that we would love it if you would hit the, like button and subscribe button, because those things do help us get, posted more on the sidebar there on YouTube, and then we can be more effective in reaching more people. If we can do that, that'd be great. We're almost 18,000. I mean, we're really only about 100 away, so it's going to be really exciting. We get to 18 and then 20,000. And again, it's not about us and hitting any kind of numbers. It's the idea of the mandate to help get a message out, okay? And since we put everything out there for free, we do not have any ulterior motives except to get the information out, okay? Okay. I know that a lot of you are contacting us about Sukkot. I do apologize for not having it up yet. We are still experiencing a few issues with the new place that we're going to be. We're trying to iron them all out before I make it all official and put the paperwork up on the site. I'm hoping to get that worked out this week. I know I've said that like 5 times, but they've been very slow getting back to us about some of the things we've asked them. Okay? They should hopefully get worked out and we'll have it all done. So please be patient. We do normally have these things up and posted way before now, but we will get that done. All right. Really great picnic and mikveh we had this weekend. I think we immersed over 30 people, or I should say they immersed themselves. Over 30 people decided to immerse. Okay, and so praise Yah. We want to pray. As part of that prayer, we should have asked that we would pray for all those who have made their covenanting decision, that Yah would strengthen them and continue to strengthen them in their decision and commitments to move forward in that direction. Okay, so the Torah portion this week is Balak. It's going to take us from Numbers chapter 22 and verse 2 to Numbers 25 verse 9. All right, 22:2 to 25:9. I have 7 readers. They're already up here, so that's great. So we've got everybody already sort of lined up, and so that's perfect. Okay, so you want to start us off, Rabbi Tom? That way, because you're already up here. We could do that. Why don't we start off with you, and then we'll work straight down the ladies. We'll work straight down this list of ladies over here. Okay, go ahead and get you started. All right, so come on up here. So for each one, we're going to have them generally come up here. We'll ask a blessing upon them. I'm going to walk over here to Rabbi Tom. And would you like to use the large print here? It's okay, you're fine. Wherever you stop, he'll get the camera on you. Here you go, I'll give you this one. Or do you want to use yours?
Yeah, I got my reading glasses.
Okay, you're good. Okay. All right, he who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Rabbi Tom, who's come upon Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Rabbi Tom's going to start us off by reading verse 2 through 14.
And Balak, son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was exceedingly afraid of the people because they were many, and Moab was in dread because of the children of Israel. And Moab said to the elders of Midian, "Now this company is licking up all that is around us, as an ox licks up the grass of the field." Now Balak, son of Zippor, was sovereign of the Moabites at that time. And he sent messengers to Balaam, son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river in the land of the sons of his people, to call him, saying, "See, a people has come from Mitzrayim, and see, they have covered the surface of the land and are settling next to me. And now, please come at once, curse these people for me, for they are too strong for me. It might be that I strike them and drive them out of the land, for I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed." And the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian left with the fees for divination in their hand, and they came to Balaam and spoke the words of Balak to him. And he said to them, "Spend the night here, and I shall bring back word to you as Yahweh speaks to me." So the heads of Moab stayed with Balaam. And Elohim came to Balaam and said, "Who are these men with you?" And Balaam said to Elohim, "Balak, son of Zippor, sovereign of Moab, has sent to me, saying, 'See, a people has come out of Mitzrayim and cover the surface of the land. Come now, curse them for me. It might be that I am able to fight against them and drive them out.' And Elohim said to Balaam, 'Do not go with them. You do not curse the people, for they are blessed.' And Balaam rose in the morning and said to the heads of Balak, 'Go back to your land, for Yahweh has refused to allow me to go with you.' And the heads of Moab arose and went to Balak and said, 'Balaam refuses to come with us.'"
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Let me put this on the side here. Okay, next up we have Candace. I can come over to you. Okay, come on over. That's okay. Oh, you going to read out of yours? You want this one? Okay. There you go. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Candace, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Candace is going to take us now from verse 15 to 27.
Then Balak again sent heads more numerous and more esteemed than they. And they came to Balaam and said to him, "This is what Balak, son of Zippor, said. Do not be withheld from coming to me, please. For I esteem you very greatly, and whatever you say to me, I do. Therefore, please come, curse this people for me." And Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, "Though Balak were to give me his house filled with silver and gold, I am unable to go beyond the word of Yahweh my Elohim to do less or more. And now, please, you also stay here tonight and let me find out what more Yahweh says to me." And Elohim came to Balaam at night and said to him, "If the men come to call you, rise and go with them, but only the word which I speak to you, that you do." And Balaam rose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the heads of Moab. But the displeasure of Elohim burned because he went. And the messenger of Yahweh stationed himself in the way as an adversary against him. And he was riding on his donkey, and his two servants were with him. And the donkey saw the messenger of Yahweh standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand. And the donkey turned aside out of the way and went into the field. So Balaam struck the donkey to turn her back onto the way. Okay. Then the messenger of Yahweh stood in a narrow passage between the vineyards, with a wall on this side and a wall on that side. And when the donkey saw the messenger of Yahweh, she pushed herself against the wall and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall, so he struck her again. And the messenger of Yahweh went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn aside, right or left. And when the donkey saw the messenger of Yahweh, she lay down under Balaam. So Balaam's displeasure burned, and he struck the donkey with his staff.
Amen, amen. Okay, thank you, Candace. Appreciate that. We'll make a trade here. Okay, next up is Brianna. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Brianna, who's come out to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Brianna, take us now from verse 28 to the end of the chapter.
Then Yahweh opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, "What have I done to you, that you have stricken me these 3 times? And Balaam said to the donkey, "Because you have mocked me, I wish there were a sword in my hand, for I would have killed you by now." And the donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your donkey on which you have ridden ever since I became yours, to this day? Was I ever known to do so to you?" And he said, "No." Then Yahweh opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the messenger of Yahweh standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand. And he bowed his head and fell on his face. And the messenger of Yahweh said to him, "Why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? See, I have come out to stand against you, because your way is reckless before me. And the donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, I certainly would have killed you by now, and let her live." And Balaam said to the messenger of Yahweh, "I have sinned, for I did not know. You stood in the way against me. And now, if evil is in your eyes, let me turn back." And the messenger of Yahweh said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but only the word that I speak to you, you speak." Balaam then went with the heads of Balak. And when Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at the city of Moab, which is on the border at the Aron, which was in the extremity of the border. And Balak said to Balaam, "Did I not urgently send to you, calling for you? Why did you not come to me? And am I not able to esteem you?" And Balaam said to Balak, "See, I have come to you. Now I am at all able to say somewhat. The word that Elohim puts in my mouth that I speak." And Balaam went to Balak, and they came to Kithroth Hutzah. And Balak slaughtered cattle and sheep, and he sent some to Balaam and to the heads who were with him. And it came to be in the morning that Balak took Balaam and brought him up to the high places of Baal. And from there he saw the extremity of the camp.
Amen, amen. Okay, thank you, Brianna. Okay, next up, Sarah Beth. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Sarah Beth, who's come out to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, take us now into chapter 23 and read the first 15 verses.
And Balaam said to Balak, "Build 7 altars for me there, and prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams for me there." And Balak said to Balaam, and Balak said as Balaam had spoken. And Balak and Balaam offered a bull and a ram on each altar. Balaam then said to Balak, "Stand by your burnt offering and let me go on. It might be that Yahweh does come to meet me, and whatever he shows me, I shall declare to you." And he went to a bare height. And Elohim came to Balaam, and he said to him, I have prepared the 7 altars, and I have offered on each altar a bull and a ram. And Yahweh put a word in the mouth of Balaam, and said, Return to Balak, and this is what you say. And he returned to him, and saw him standing by his burnt offering, he and all the heads of Moab. And he took up his proverb and said, Balak, the sovereign of Moab, has brought me from Aram, from the mountains of the east. Come, curse Yaakov for me, and come, rage at Yisrael. How do I curse whom El has not cursed? How do I rage at whom Yahweh has not raged? For from the top of the rocks I see him, and from the hills I observe him. Look, a people dwelling alone, not reckoning itself among the nations. Who shall count the dust of Yaakov, and the number of 1/4 of Yisrael? Let me die the death of the upright, and let my end be like his. And Balak said to Balaam, What have you done to me? I took you to curse my enemies, and look, you have kept on blessing. And he answered and said, Should I not take heed to speak what Yahweh has put in my mouth? And Balak said to him, Please come with me to another place, from where you see them. You only see the extremity, but not all of them. Curse them for me from there. And he took him to the field of Tziphoam, to the top of Pisgah, and built 7 altars, and offered a bull and a ram on each altar. And he said to Balak, Stand here by your burnt offering, while I meet over there.
All right, thank you, Sarah Beth. Okay, Shannon. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Shannon, who's come down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family, and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, you're going to take us now from verse 16 to 30. I think we're in chapter 20.
16 to 30. Okay. And Yahweh came to Balaam and put a word in his mouth and said, Go back to Balak and say this. So he went to him and saw him standing by his ascending offering, and the heads of Moab with him. And Balak asked him, What did Yahweh say? And he took up his proverb and said, Rise up, Balak, and hear. Listen to me, son of Zippor. El is not a man to lie, nor a son of man to repent. Has he said, and would he not do it? Or spoken, and would not confirm it? See, I have received to bless, and he has blessed, and I do not reverse it. He has not looked upon wickedness in Yaakov, nor has he seen trouble in Israel. His Elohim is with him, and the shout of a sovereign is in him. El, who brought them out of Mizraim, is for them like the horns of a wild ox. For there is no sorcery against Yaakov, nor is there any divination against Israel. Now it is said to Yaakov and to Israel, What has El done? Look, a people rises like a lioness and lifts itself up like a lion. It lies down until it devours the prey and drinks the blood of the slain. And Balak said to Balaam, Do not curse them at all, nor bless them at all. And Balaam answered and said to Balak, Have I not spoken to you, saying, All that Yahweh speaks, that I do? And Balak said to Balaam, Please come, let me take you to another place. It might be right in the eyes of Elohim that you curse them for me from there. And Balak took Balaam to the top of Peor, and that overlooks the wasteland. And Balaam said to Balak, Build 7 slaughter places for me here, and prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams for me here. And Balak said to Balaam, did as Balaam had said, and offered a bull and a ram on each slaughter place.
Amen. All right, next up is Rebbetzin Julie. He who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Rebbetzin Julie, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family, and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, you're going to take us into chapter 24. I read the first 14 verses.
Okay. And when Balaam saw that it pleased Yahweh to bless Israel, he did not go as at other times to seek to use sorcery, but he set his face toward the wilderness. And Balaam lifted up his eyes and saw Israel encamped according to their tribes, and the Spirit of Elohim came upon him. And he took up his proverb and said, the saying of Balaam, son of Beor, and the saying of the man whose eyes are opened, the saying of him who hears the words of El, who sees the vision of the Almighty, who falls down with eyes opened wide. How good are your tents, O Yaakov, your dwellings, O Yisrael, like wadis that stretch out, like gardens by a river, like aloes planted by Yahweh, like cedars beside waters. He makes water flow from his buckets, and his seed is in many waters. His sovereign is higher than Agag, and his reign is exalted. El, who brought him out of Mitzrayim, is for them like the horns of a wild ox. He devours nations, his enemies, and he breaks their bones, and with his arrows he smites. He bowed down, he lay down like a lion, and like a lion, who would rouse him? Blessed is he who blesses you, and cursed is he who curses you. Then the displeasure of Balak burned against Balaam, and he struck his hands together. Balak then said to Balaam, I summoned you to curse my enemies, and see, you have kept on blessing these 3 times. And now flee to your place. I said I would greatly esteem you, and see, Yahweh has kept you back from esteem. And Balaam said to Balak, did I not also speak to your messengers whom you sent to me, saying, if Balak should give me his house filled with silver and gold, I am unable to go beyond the word of Yahweh, to do either good or evil of my own heart. What Yahweh speaks, that I speak. And now see, I am going to my people. Come, let me advise you what this people is going to do to your people in the latter days.
Amen. Thank you. All right. Last reader is Shira. He who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Shira, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, it's a little bit more complicated because you're going to go across the chapter border there. So you're going to start here in verse 15, and you're going to go to chapter 25 and verse 9.
And he took up his proverb and said, the saying of Balaam, son of Beor, and the saying of the man whose eyes are opened, the saying of him who hears the words of El and knows the knowledge of the Most High, who sees the vision of the Almighty, who falls down with eyes opened wide. I see him, but not now. I observe him, but not near. A star shall come out of Yaakov, and a scepter shall rise out of Yisrael, and shall smite the corners of Moab, and shall destroy all the sons of Sheth. And Edom shall be a possession, and Seir shall be a possession, enemies, and Yisrael is doing mightily. And out of Yaakov one shall rule and destroy the remnant from Ar. He then looked on Amalek, and he took up his proverb and said, Amalek was first among the nations, but his latter end is to perish forever. He then looked on the Canaanites, and he took up his proverb and said, firm is your dwelling place, and your nest is set in the rock, but Cain is to be burned. Till when does Ashur keep you captive? And he took up his proverb and said, oh, who does live when El does this? And ships shall come from the coast of Kittim, and they shall afflict Ashur and afflict Eber, and so shall Amalek, and he also perishes. And Balaam arose and left, and returned to his place, and Balak also went his way. Chapter 25. And Yisrael dwelt in Shittim, and the people began to war with the daughters of Moab, and they invited the people to the slaughterings of their mighty ones. And the people ate and bowed down to their mighty ones. Thus Yisrael was joined to Baal Peor, and the displeasure of Yahweh burned against Yisrael. And Yahweh said to Moshe, Take all the leaders of the people and hang them up before Yahweh, before the sun, so that the burning displeasure of Yahweh turns away from Yisrael." And Moshe said to the judges of Yisrael, "Each one of you kill his men who were joined to Baal Peor." And see, one of the children of Yisrael came and brought to his brothers a Midianite woman before the eyes of Moshe and before the eyes of all the congregation of the children of Yisrael, who were weeping at the door of the tent of appointment. And when Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aharon the priest, saw it, he rose up from among the congregation and took a spear in his hand. And he went after the man of Yisrael into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of Yisrael and the woman through her belly. Thus the plague among the children of Yisrael came to a stop, and those who died in the plague were 24,000.
Amen, amen. Okay, thank you, Shira. I think it'd be easier if I use this. There we go. All right, so that's going to conclude the readings. I do appreciate all the readers who came up today. Appreciate that very much. We do have the traditional closing blessing. Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu Baruch atah Yahweh noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh our Elohim, King of the universe, who has given us a Torah of truth and has planted eternal life in our midst. Blessed are you, Yahweh, giver of the Torah. Amen and amen. Amen. Okay. Let me just reset here because I like to use my smaller version. I like to use this 98 version that I have here. Okay. So, wow, a lot of stuff happening in this. I mean, it was a very, kind of exciting. If you can imagine the scene that was actually happening and how it was playing out, how exciting that would have been. I mean, here's Israel going through this land, another nation wanting to, curse them, and the battle is kind of brewing, ready to go. And then, of course, we get to the end there where we get introduced to Phinehas, who is our leader and hero for next week's part, right? We're going to talk about Phinehas a little bit. And so, as we go through this discussion part, and that's what we're up to now, I just want to again remind everyone that, if you're on live watching us now, if you've not been with us before, this is sponsored by Beth Shalom, a local congregation here in Cleveland, Tennessee, and MTOI, which is sort of the umbrella organization that, has a half a dozen or so affiliate congregations around the world, and we are broadcasting every Shabbat at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. Excuse me, so you're all welcome to come and participate in that if you don't have anything that you already are attending or any place to go. All right, so what we're going to do now is go through a discussion, and if the camera wonders why I keep looking this way, it's because everybody in the room is sitting on this side, which is okay, which does make it easier for Owen to bring the mic around. So, and if you're on live stream, Manny will be taking down some comments or questions, okay? By the way, if you're on the live stream and you're new, and even if you're not so new maybe, if you ask a question that can be best answered by a teaching that already exists, that I've done, rather than answer the question, we may just point you in the direction of the teaching, because rather than give you a bullet point quick answer that might not be as helpful as you might think it would be, we want to point you in a direction where there might be an hour or 2 or 5 or 10 that kind of explain things very thoroughly so that you'll understand. So if you genuinely want the answer, that's what we'll do. Now, bear in mind, we don't sell the teachings, so this is not some promotional way to kind of get you to buy something. We'll just point you in the direction of the free teachings that will, I believe, and I think we would all agree, is better suited to get the more thorough answer to these things that sometimes can be kind of challenging. Okay. Now, of course, if I can give a short answer, I will. So we're going to try to go from the beginning, which is beginning here in chapter 22. I've got a whole bunch of stuff I've got written down. if you've got anything that you have a comment or question about, you can go ahead and raise your hand here. If you're on live stream, Manny will be marking those down. And let's try to take this, because it is important, as you know, when we've been teaching a lot of things about context. Context often can get lost if you lose the flow of the events that are happening. And so we want to try to take this somewhat chronologically and not jump around too much, at least until we get through to chapter 25. And then if we need to jump around a little bit, we will. This is not a hard and fast rule. We'll just try to do it the best we can. Okay, who wants to start us off? Okay, in the back, Rabbi Tom.
Okay, thank you. Something that I noticed when I was reading this. In verse 8 and in verse 19, Balaam says, spend the night here. And that's the first set of Balak's emissaries. Then to the second group, he said the same thing. Stay here tonight. So what that showed me is, I think that was Balaam's first mistake, was inviting these people to stay into his home. And this is what we have to be careful of, who we're going to associate, who we're going to allow into our home, who we're going to show our hospitality to. Because he should have known, he undoubtedly did know that these men were men of evil intent. And he should have just said, well, okay, I'm not going to go with you, so you can turn around and go back. But he invited them. That's a very dangerous thing that we can do.
Amen. That certainly is a lesson that we could possibly get out of that. I think it's also possible that we're dealing with somebody who is already well established and known to do these things. And, even the tricksters of today who use their little mirrored balls and whatever they use, tend to ask people to wait while they get an answer, or do you do something to try to get an answer that's not just coming out of them. And so he was going to say, look, let's take some time. Let's see what answer I get. Now, whether he's going to make something up or actually go to Yahweh, well, we see him go to Yahweh in these cases. But you notice there's something very interesting in chapter 23 and verse 23, as well as 24:1. So it says that he didn't, this time, like he's done in the past, use sorcery. He says, for there is no sorcery against Yaakov, nor is there any divination. And then in 24:1, he says that when Balaam saw that it displeased Yahweh to bless Israel, that it pleased Yahweh to bless Israel, he did not go as at other times to seek to use sorcery. Okay? So this is part of what he was probably doing as well. Now, of course, as Rabbi Tom pointed out, if that was kind of what he was doing and other people, that's what they were seeking, that was already a formula for disaster. That was not going to go well. Okay? So that's a good point there to kind of point out. Okay, what's next? Okay, Lisa?
I have a question. Just something stuck out to me that I heard, because I kind of have to pay attention to my son, but Balak said, if to his donkey, if I would have had a sword, I would have struck you, you would have been dead. And then a couple chapters later, the angel of the Lord says to Balak, if you had moved, I would have struck you dead. And just like, I don't know, something in there just caught my attention. I don't know exactly, but just the same words. So I don't know if you have something to say to that, but it just kind of brings up like correction. Like, I know, like when I'm correcting you, like there's things, and then the Father just shows me, yeah, you're dealing with that, kind of in a different way. But
okay,
like just the correction we sometimes we have over as an authority, we can to whoever we have under us, we can say something because we're frustrated or upset with them, and then we find out that the Father's trying to actually say that to us, like get in line, or I don't know, just kind of stuck out to me.
Amen. Okay. Let me see. You know, I think as a parent you may have this experience, but you have to have two children for it. But if one child goes to strike the other child and you're aware of it and they're threatening, well, I'm going to hit you. And you walk over and say, that's okay. If you go and hit him or her, I'm going to hit you. So it kind of has that sort of like, okay, that's what you're going to do. What am I going to do to you? Okay? So there's some of that stuff going on there. But we have to understand, and we're going to get into this in a minute here, why is Yahweh displeased? Why is he upset with Bilam? And so might as well, since you brought it up, we'll go ahead and deal with that. Because, you know, he sends the messenger, and the messenger says, why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? See, I've come out to stand against you because your way is reckless before me. So why is Yahweh mad? Because he says that the messenger of Yahweh, then the messenger of Yahweh stood in a narrow pathway. Let's see if I go back to the beginning. Okay, verse 22, but the displeasure of Yahweh, this is chapter 22, but the displeasure of Yahweh burned because he went. Why? Didn't he tell him to go? Yes, he did, but no, he didn't. What did he say? Okay. Okay, so let's go look at what Yahweh actually said. Okay? So we're looking at this whole thing here, and look at verse 20. Elohim came to Bilam that night and said to him, if the men come to call you, rise and go with them. The men come to call you. It says, Bilam rose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the heads of the Moab. It doesn't say that they came to him. It looks like Bilam went to them. There's a whole different thing. Yahweh had a plan here. We don't know what it would have looked like had he waited for them to come to him, and whether or not they would have come to him, because we see that he just got up and he went out to them. Okay? And so we have that going on here, and that's really important that we understand. So Yahweh expects his instructions to be followed specifically, in detail, correctly. And he's talking, remember, this is a guy who's done sorcery. This is a guy who's done all these other things. And he is seeking the Most High. And the Most High is talking to him. Okay, so, you know, this is, and again, Yahweh's working with the one that Balak went to deal with, because he knows this is the one that's going to be sent to curse Israel. And so Yahweh is talking to him. But he's very much trying to limit him in what he can do at that point. And tell him, look, because he still has this mindset. This is a very important mindset. His mindset is in verse 18. Bilam answers and said to the servants of Balak, though Balak were to give me his house filled with silver and gold, I am unable to go. I am unable to go beyond the word of Yahweh Elohim, Yahweh my Elohim, to do less or more. By the way, use these words when your boss wants you to come in on Saturday, when your family wants you to come to Christmas dinner, whatever it is that someone's asking you to do that goes against Torah, say, I'm sorry, but I cannot go beyond the word of Yahweh my Elohim. I know we're quoting a guy who's not the greatest hero of all time in the Bible. As a matter of fact, he's very notorious in a lot of ways. But at this moment, he says the right thing. He says, I cannot go beyond. Now, of course, he almost immediately does exactly that, which is what part of why Yahweh's mad at him. Because Yahweh said, don't go unless they come, and it doesn't say that that's what they did. So he got up and went. So much for saying I can't go beyond the word of Yahweh. Okay? And so we have that going on there. And he says that again when he quotes it in 24:13. The same idea he quotes again when he said from what I just read, which is remember when I told Balak that even if you gave me the servants, if you gave me all of the silver and gold and blah, 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 I still could not go beyond, I'm unable to go beyond the word of Yahweh to do either good or evil of my own heart. What Yahweh speaks, that I speak. So he was trying to at least have integrity to what Yahweh speaks, I speak. It's not so much what Yahweh said, he did. Okay? And that was kind of, what is the big thing that Yahweh hates, that Yahweh really struggles with watching us do? He really doesn't like us doing it. Hypocrisy. See? Here's a guy saying, well, I can't do more than what Yahweh says, and then he goes and does more than what Yahweh says. That's a little bit of hypocrisy there. And that's something Yeshua talks about a lot. He doesn't like hypocrisy. He talks about it in Matthew 23 quite a bit. Woe to you, you Pharisees, you scribes, you hypocrites. He tells us that the leaven of the Pharisees and the scribes is hypocrisy. Okay, so listen to the teaching and get out the leaven. You'll have all that. Okay, so thank you for bringing that up. But now, another issue that came up with the donkey whole thing. Okay, so isn't it strange that nobody generally ever asks the question why Balaam is not freaking out because the donkey's talking to him? That never comes up. I've been doing this for over 20 years. Nobody ever asked the question, hey, why isn't Balaam freaking out because the donkey's talking to him? I mean, I would be freaking out if a donkey started talking to me. Maybe that was normal back in Balaam's day. I don't think so. Okay? Because it's, he can't see the messenger, but all of a sudden he's talking to him. He's arguing with the donkey, threatening to kill the donkey, but he clearly hears what the donkey's saying. Okay, the donkey says to him, I have to go back to the chapter. Give me a second. Let's see. Okay, so the donkey says to Balaam, okay, then Yahweh opened the mouth of the donkey and said to Balaam, what have I done to you that you've beaten me these 3 times? And Balaam says to the donkey, this is chapter 22, verse 28 and 29. He says, what have I done, what have I done to you that you've beaten me these 3 times? And Balaam says to the donkey, he's talking with the donkey. He says, because you mocked me. You're being mocked by a donkey. I wish there was a sword in my hand, for I would have killed you by now. Donkey says, am I not your donkey on which you have ridden ever since I have become yours? To this day, was I ever known to do so to you? And he said, no. Then Yahweh opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the message. He didn't open his eyes and realize he's talking to a donkey. Okay, so I want to give you something that might be on a sort of deeper level. A possibility there is that this was not a donkey. It's a beast of burden. It was a servant. See, we have a thing in Judaism that's known as, or referred to as the tzaddik. A tzaddik is a righteous one. Okay, and the Jewish community believes that in every generation there's either one or a certain small amount of tzaddikim, or righteous ones in that generation. And these people don't generally have big positions. They're not necessarily, or not even almost ever, teachers. They're ones who happen to just be walking it out in a perfect way. They don't have the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is the evil inclination. They're not tempted to do wrong things. That's why this donkey could see the messenger. He was a righteous one. But now this donkey had his mouth open. Now that either meant that he could have been dumb and wasn't speaking, but again, of course, Balaam doesn't freak out like, wow, you've never spoken before. Or it could be that as a servant, he needed permission to speak. And so he opened his mouth and said, you now have permission to speak. Because that's the servant's role, was not to speak unless spoken to and not addressed. And then even when you're spoken to, if you're being scolded, you're not necessarily going to just address back. But he was given freedom to speak. And so Balaam is now hearing this. He said, look, I have served you. He says, have I not been a donkey in which you have ridden since I've become yours to this day? Have I ever done anything such as this to you? And so he sees the messenger. Not because animals, generally speaking, see messengers. Okay, we don't have scripture that says that. But because in his role as servant to Balaam, he's trying to protect him. So it could be that this is a metaphor. We're being taught here in a metaphor that this is a messenger that is standing there and his servant is seeing this. Okay, so there's a deeper hint and level to this story. It's either a remez, a hint here, or we could even look at it as maybe allegorical or sod level. He's trying to tell us in a story a bigger picture. That you may have those among you that are righteous ones, you might want to listen to them. Okay? They may not always be in a position of authority. And by the way, some of you might think that's you. No. You notice that the donkey isn't going to Balaam and saying, hey, by the way, you need to listen to me. It was only after being beaten, he finally said, why are you beating me? I'm just trying to save your life. Because some of you might say, well, I'm not in leadership, but I need to go to leadership and straighten them all out. That's not what I'm talking about. Righteous ones don't do that. Okay? From what I understand from all of the older Jewish writings, there were those that knew there was a righteous one in the community that were in leadership, and they would seek the righteous one out sometimes to talk to them. Not the other way around. The righteous one is just quietly leading his life. The first righteous one that we see in Scripture that we have pointed to that we can look at, not the first one chronologically, but the big deal is like Job. Job is a righteous one. This is why Hasatan says, well, he He's only righteous because you give him everything. Because he always says, what do you think of my righteous Job? What do you think of my righteous one here? He says, you give him everything. And no, Yahweh's like, no, he doesn't have that evil inclination. He's a righteous one. That's what Yeshua, the righteous one. We're trying to get to that place where we are tzaddikim, righteous ones. We're not pulled and drawn by that evil inclination, the desire for fleshly things. Okay? And so I know some people out there are going to argue, oh, though it absolutely was a donkey. Maybe it was. I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm saying there may be an absolutely bigger picture here that we can get out of it in looking at the donkey in the metaphor. Because it strikes me every time I read it, how come Balaam is not freaking out that the donkey's talking to him? Because I know if I was riding on a donkey and it was trying to smash my leg up against the wall and everything else was going on, and then it started getting in my face and yelling at me, so to speak, or straightening me, I'd be a little bit taken aback by a donkey talking. So would most of you, probably all of you, okay? All right, but then notice this is Yahweh opened his eyes not to figure out the donkey, but to figure out the messenger. And he says, your way is reckless. In other words, what does reckless kind of let you kind of think of? You just do it your way, what you want, without consideration of consequence. That's reckless. You're not thinking of consequences, you're just doing. You're just going off and doing whatever you want without thinking about consequences. Now remember, this is someone that Yahweh actually spoke to. That takes a higher consideration then and a higher expectation. And so Yahweh was not pleased. Excuse me. All right, next comment or question. Oh, Manny's waving his hand wildly back there. Okay. Well, go ahead, Rabbi Tom, and then we'll get it over to Manny.
Okay, I have a question about verse 18, but can I make a comment on the donkey first?
Sure.
Okay. Balaam was held in very high regard. He was considered a very wise, intelligent man. People sought him out. They put him on a pedestal. They looked up at him for his wisdom and everything. And they all admired him. And everyone just didn't even give the donkey a second look. And what I thought of when I read this is that there are people today, like you said, who should put down the mic, but they can't. And people are looking to them for wisdom, and they overlook the little donkeys who can see the danger ahead and who have insight that all these other wise, intelligent, all-knowing people don't. And so I think that's a lesson that we have.
Amen. Again, remember, the donkey is only speaking after being beaten a few times, doing everything it can to try to make a difference without having to correct its owner, or it's the master who he serves. And only when Yahweh gave him the permission to speak did he speak.
Amen. But my question goes back to verse 18. Balaam says, I cannot go beyond the word of Yahweh my Elohim. And I wondered, even though he said that, was Yahweh really his Elohim? That's my question.
Okay, so a lot of times this comes up in trying to figure out, well, who was Balaam anyway? Well, Balaam was your typical mess, just like the mess in leadership when Yeshua was walking around. Okay, they all claimed Yahweh as their Elohim, but then they did all kinds of things they shouldn't do. Saul considered Yahweh his Elohim, and then Saul went to the witch in Endor. Okay, so go figure. So just because one claims to be of Elohim, like those who say they know him and are not keeping his commandments are liars, or like the ones who say, Lord, Lord, and he said, get away from me, I didn't know you. Lots of people think they have relationships on a level that's beyond what they really have. Now, clearly he had a relationship enough that Yahweh spoke to him, but Yahweh spoke to him because it was needed for the accomplishing of what Yahweh wanted to do. This was the channel that was going to be used to try. If he had not intervened there, Balaam would have gone and cursed Israel with whatever pagan witchcraft he would have done, because it says he normally would do sorcery. Okay? Why would he do sorcery? My guess is that Yahweh didn't usually answer him. Okay? And so then he would take things into his own hands and do what he wanted to do. In this case, Yahweh did answer him. So he still thought of Yahweh as his Elohim. By the way, so does all of mainstream Christianity. Okay, so do all kinds of people in the Jewish community and all of the splits from the Messianic and all the other flavors that use the Bible as their source. They all think of they may say the Lord or whatever they say, but they always think of that being of the Old Testament as their God, as their Elohim. But look at all of the bazillion different ways they express that, as opposed to, according to Scripture, what he actually says. But they claim to be doing his stuff. Look, Yeshua tells us there are those who are going to kill you claiming they're doing Elohim's work. No surprise, we see this happening at the beginning here with Balaam. Actually, it goes back even further. Okay, Manny, what do you got?
First, I wanted to personally ask you a question on 22:30. It talks about the donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your donkey on which you have ridden ever since I have become yours to this day?" I was curious because you were talking about the deeper level. Does the Hebrew actually translate metaphorically like English, where ridden might have been like when you say, my boss has been riding me all day?
Yep. I would say that it probably does. I mean, I don't have the Hebrew in front of me. I mean, it might just literally mean the idea of riding on. But look, in other words, I have carried you. Okay? I've carried you. It's not so much necessarily that the boss is riding hard, but he said, look, I've carried you all these years. That's a much more direct sort of metaphor there. Okay?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Awesome.
Ever since I became yours, haven't I carried you?
Yes, you have, Rabbi.
I think he just called me a donkey. Okay, that's good. That's good, though. I won't use the other word, but go ahead.
Called you at Sadiq.
Oh, Sadiq, okay, I appreciate that.
All right, Chino Man wants to know, even though Yah's displeasure, 22, burned against Balaam, he did not strike him the way Balaam struck his faithful donkey. Also, we can become blinded by flattery. Kevin and Rhonda, in 22:20 through 22.
Wait, hold on. Let me go back to the first one. Chino Man said, okay, I believe he didn't strike him simply because he wanted to make sure, and that's what the messenger was there to do. He wanted to make sure that he would actually keep his word and do what Yahweh said. Now, if he wouldn't have, I think the messenger would have put a stop to it right there, because he was already showing disobedience to Yah. Okay? And so the messenger puts it clear. And the messenger says, go with the men, but only speak the word that I speak to you, that you speak. And Balaam, agrees to do this. He's saying, I'm telling you right now, I would have killed you, but I didn't, because you still got a task to finish. And so the only reason I think he was spared, because there was still more to do. Okay.
Okay. Kevin and Rhonda Hamilton, chapter 22, verse 20 through 22. Should Balaam have waited until the third group was sent in this what Yahweh was wroth with him about?
Yeah, I think I addressed that. Basically, we covered that. That was where he was supposed to wait for them. Yes. It looks like, it doesn't say it very specifically, but it looks like he just got up and left and went to them and went with them.
Got it.
Okay.
Well, Charlie and Renee, is the messenger of Yahweh in 22:31 Yeshua? Question mark.
Okay.
They want to know, usually when someone bows to a messenger, the messenger is an angel. He's told not to worship him.
Yeah, well, the bowing down isn't worship. Go listen to teaching what is worship, okay? And that's an important teaching, but because we find that Jacob bows down to Esau, we see all kinds of people bowing down to different people. As long as you're not bowing down to them as Elohim, okay, bowing down has the idea of honoring, has to do with the idea of respecting, okay, and that's totally fine, especially between men and men, unless you're now treating that man as Elohim, which of course Pharaoh would have wanted to be treated as, Caesar would have wanted to be treated as, even Balak would have wanted to be treated as, but he's not, here he's got a messenger. Now when it says messenger, I know lots of people, okay, lots of teachers love to freely insert whoever and whatever they want whenever it says messenger. I am very reluctant to do that. Okay? I'd rather leave it just as messenger. Okay? Could it be, Yeshua? Could it be some other? I mean, look, the same thing like when Jacob wrestled. It doesn't tell us. Okay? And so, hey, I'll leave it as what it is. I don't need to know that to walk this out. It was one of those things that when we get to the kingdom, we'll ask. Okay? I don't think speculating, guessing, and inserting whatever you want wherever you want or making your best guess is necessarily expediently helpful. It's expedient, but it's not helpful. Okay? I don't think it really gives you anything that you can then usefully take forward. It just scratches that itch that you're curious about. So I'm not gonna give in to that temptation. I'm sorry. Okay, what else you got?
Michael Diaz would like to know, did the donkey actually speak, or was it possible that only he heard it?
Well, it doesn't look like anybody else was around at that point, right there hearing or seeing or dealing with these things. So it seems that it says that his mouth was open, so he was speaking. Okay?
All right. Let's see. Robert Wyatt, chapter 22:34. What does Balaam mean when he said, send to the messenger?
22 where?
22:34.
Oh, when Balaam said to the messenger of Yahweh? Well, he was talking. I mean, he was obviously, at this point he could see him. Okay? It says Balaam's eyes were open in verse 31, and now he's talking to the messenger. And so he said to the messenger of Yahweh, I have sinned. He said, I did not know you stood in the way. As if so you should treat your donkey this way anyway? Like this is the right way to treat your donkey or your servant, whichever way he played out. Even if it was a donkey, this is what you should do?
Let's see. Here's a question from Zora. So the reason... Oh, she's asking about the Sadiq part. So the reason Balaam didn't freak out is why? I'm confused about that. Oh, are you also saying that Sadiq are perfect? Are they in need of salvation then if they're perfect?
Okay, so it's not that Tzaddikim don't make mistakes and those kind of things. They're just not tempted by the evil inclination. We can all make mistakes in error. We can make mistakes in lots of different ways. And there's actually a sacrifice for that kind of a sin that you can do. But these are people that are not tempted as we are with the evil inclination. And that's why Job could not be tempted to do anything by Hasatan. And he was trying very hard to do it, and it didn't work, okay? Because there wasn't anything there to tempt. It's kind of like what I've talked about over and over again when I talk about Hasatan. I say, look, if there's nothing there to work with, he doesn't bother you. If you have never had an alcohol problem, he won't tempt you with alcohol. If you've never had a drug problem, he won't tempt you with drugs. If you've never had a lust problem, he doesn't tempt you with the lust or whatever that is. A food problem or this problem, a gambling problem, whatever it is, or anger problem. I don't know, whatever problem you could have, if you don't have that in you, guess what? You don't get tempted in those areas because it wouldn't work on you. Okay? Some of you have had alcohol problems. I'll use that as a simple idea. I've never been tempted to get roaring drunk or any of those kind of things. So Hasatan never tries to get me to go ahead and get drunk. It just wasn't something I was interested in doing. It just wasn't there. It wasn't a temptation. Okay? I've got other problems though. Everybody's got problems, right? The tzaddikim though don't have those kind of fleshly urges. That doesn't mean they're perfect. Okay, they're righteous. Okay, and that's the important thing. They do what's right. Right, they have integrity. So when they make mistakes, they fix it. All right? Now, this is coming from Jewish tradition. This is not a scripturally laid out thing. So don't kind of take this too strongly. I'm just saying is we can see what that can look like when you look at somebody like like Job, okay? That those temptations are not there. And so Hasatan fails. These are inferred things that we can come up with the idea of a tzaddik. But when we look at our brother Judah, who's been doing this a whole lot longer than anybody, they have insights that sometimes are very valuable. I don't say we do everything that they say, and I'm not saying we should embrace everything that they say or do. But sometimes they have some valuable insights. After all, just like anybody who's been doing something longer than you have may know something about that thing that you're doing better than you do or have some insights, and you might go to that person who's more experienced, has been doing it longer, and learn something. We could do that with our Jewish brethren as well, our brothers as well. Okay? And I find that sort of fits this situation a little bit. Because also when they talk about the tzaddik, they talk about it often being like the shoemaker or the gardener, or just somebody doing just some normal everyday thing and not something that has attention and is in the spotlight. Okay? All right.
Did people have questions
Yep, we
beyond
got it.
chapter 22?
Yeah.
Okay. I just had one more for chapter 22 then.
Okay.
And this is an interesting one. Since the donkey was allowed to speak, do you think that animals had the ability to speak before the fall of man in the garden?
There's nothing that hints either way. Because remember, the snake wasn't talking when he was a snake. He was talking and then became a snake. So, because I have a friend who's atheist who says, what, do you believe in a talking snake? I said, shows how much you know the Bible. Okay, I said, he was talking and then he was punished and became the snake on the ground. Okay, so now let's just make sure that we catch the story correctly. But, it doesn't say. All right?
Yeah, the other questions I have are for 23 and 25.
Okay, we'll get back to those in a second. We're going to bring the mic back here to Shira and Candace. All right, Candace first.
Okay, something that comes to mind on this thing with, with Balaam is that Yahweh tells him to wait for the men to come to him. And there's times when God speaks to us and tells us to do something, but and I know from experience, I'm going to talk for myself, that I went ahead and I rushed in and did what I wanted to do anyway, instead of waiting. And it would turn out to be a disaster. So I see that kind of in the story.
Amen.
That sometimes we need to just chill out, let Yahweh work things out, and because in the end it'll come out better.
Amen. Actually, I want to thank Candace, really a big thank you, because I didn't say something that I always say, which is we should be looking for what we can glean out of it that applies in our lives and see ourselves in the portion, and you just did that very well. Okay? You want to say, look at moments and say, are there moments when I'm Bilam? I pray to Yahweh, I feel like Yahweh's told me something or led me in a direction, and then I rush off and do whatever it is I want because I'm not patient to wait. So you can see yourself in that position. Okay? You might even see yourself as Balak, wanting him to curse somebody. Okay?
Or even just wanting to do it my way instead of Yahweh's way.
Yep.
He gave the direction, wait for these men to come to you. And then Balaam just gets up in the morning and does his own thing instead of what Yahweh told him to do.
Exactly. Okay, Shira?
Couple things. If indeed, and I love the teaching about the tzaddik, I love that. But if indeed it was a real donkey, a regular donkey,
Sure.
I see from the words of Balaam, he was in a blind rage. And this really strikes me that when we let anger get the best of us, we can actually stumble right past the miraculous.
Amen.
Amen. But the point that is really impressing on me is going back to verse 12, because to me this whole passage he's just equivocating with Elohim. He doesn't really know Elohim. He's not truly covenanted according to the marriage covenant of Sinai, because if he had been, it would have been the heart of the matter in verse 12 to realize Elohim's will right off the bat is you aren't going to curse this people. That's not my will. But then they come and they talk about money and riches and esteem, and then he starts equivocating. So you can almost see the fact that, he responds well in the first place, but he doesn't stick with it because he really hasn't got that heart of Elohim.
There's, in the beginning of that verse, he says, do not go with them. Okay, in verse 12, he says, do not go with them. Okay? And so he's like, okay, but maybe if we go along a little longer, maybe he'll change his mind or give me something else I can do. And so he says, well, let's go over here and let's see what Elohim has to say. And let's keep going down here and see if he does. And he says, look, I am not like a man. I don't repent. I don't change my mind. I don't relent what I say. When I say it, that's it. Okay? One of the biggest things you'll get out of this Torah portion is Yah's will is done. Not just, Yah's will be done. It's done. I mean, he said, Balak says to Balaam, I asked you to curse them, and 3 times you've blessed them, because that's what Yah wanted. His will is going to be done. Not whatever you want, not whatever you think. And his will is done. And so that's a great point.
Just one final thing, too. Mm-hmm. That whole thing about Yah's mad a man that he should lie, that's another great support scripture for the people who think he changed his mind about what he said on Sinai.
That's right. He doesn't change his mind. Okay, Candace?
And speaking about anger, here Balaam's enraged, and he's at this donkey, and he's going at him, and he's being very ugly to him. And I know in the past in my life, I have been so angry, I've said words. You can't take these words back. And there would be really bad words. Today, because of your teaching, Rabbi, today I was doing my laundry, and this lady was down there, and there's like 4 washers, 3 dryers. And she was using 2 of the washers, and I put my clothes in one of the washers, and I thought, surely there'll be a dryer, since she's only got 2 loads. Well, I go down there, and she has all 3 dryers, and I'm trying to get my work done so I can be on time to come to Torah study. And I found myself getting angry. And I stopped, because I was really, really angry. I stopped and I said, Yahweh is allowing this. He's allowing this. And I was able to abate my anger. And when I was going to go down and just get my clothes out of the wash machine and put them in my basket and waited another 30 minutes to use the dryers. And when I went down there with my basket to get my clothes, the lady said, she went into one of the dryers and she started to pull clothes. She says, if you wait a few minutes, I'll give you this dryer. So I think it was a test for me to see if I would acknowledge the fact that Yahweh is allowing this.
Amen.
He does allow it. So sometimes, instead of getting so hot angry, if we can just stop and pause and realize, Yahweh is allowing this. Why is he allowing this?
Amen. Amen. There's a piece in this that we didn't talk about with the donkey and the messenger, which is, and it has to do with what you just said. Here is Balaam beating on his donkey for not doing what he wants him to do. And the messenger is like, well, shouldn't I beat on you because you didn't do what you were told to do? And that kind of goes to a parable Yeshua gives, where he talks about forgiving a servant a debt, and then they go and beat on their other servants. I mean, you have these relational things that are not passing through. He says, well, how you treat others, you reap what you sow, love your neighbor as yourself, and how you treat others might be done unto you, etc. He says, look, you're beating on your donkey, but wait, were you obedient? Did you do what you were supposed to do? As a servant of the Most High, your donkey's your servant, you're the Most High's servant. So you got to remember, what have I taught you guys about leadership? Everybody except the Father is in the middle. So whatever you're doing to those underneath you who are serving and you have a leadership capacity over, how you treat them, be careful, because how are you treating the one that you're leading? I mean, that's leading you, that you're under. Oh, maybe he's allowed them to act a certain way towards you because that's the way you act towards him. And he wants you to feel what he feels. And that'll wake you up a little bit. You think of that a little bit. Okay? Excellent point. Okay, where's the mic? Back here to Manny, okay? Live stream.
There's only a couple questions for 23, but one last one for 22. Any significance on the donkey or Sadiq being described as a she-donkey? Verse 27.
That verse, when I read that, I have to go back into the Hebrew to see if it just has to do with it being that's the gender linked to donkey. I haven't looked at the Hebrew to see. Okay?
Got it. All right. Charles Davis would like to know in chapter 23, is there any significance in the number 7?
I'm sure there is with the altars. 7 has a lot to do always with the idea of perfection. Okay, so, this sort of complete, perfect sort of thing to do. But if you notice that in the altars, and we didn't get to that, but it does have to do with some of the things we already talked about, this is Balaam trying to manipulate Yahweh. Okay, he sets up altars, and he says, I set up these altars for you, and I put the ram, and I put the lamb, and I did these things, and, oh, okay, you did these things. And so, what did he put? He put the bull and the ram, right? He's trying to manipulate. He says, look, I'm trying to buy you off. Remember, he's a hired gun. He's a curser or blesser for hire. And so he's thinking that if it works for me, it should work for Yah. I'm going to try to impress him with these altars and these sacrifices. He said, look, I did all these things. Aren't you going to let me do what I need to do now so I can get my payday? He's still trying to get paid. Okay, next question.
Olivia and Janet Hoffman, 23:23, the names of Jacob and Israel are used. Just wondering if this is referring to the people of Elohim. If so, are these names interchangeable?
Excellent. I actually wrote down it was first used in verse 7, in 23:7, I actually wrote it down. Okay? This came up actually in a question earlier today that Manny brought to me from somebody had contacted us. Listen, it's I was going to call it a literary style, but it's really a speaking style. Yahweh has a speaking style of saying the same thing twice using slightly different somethings. In this case, Yaakov and Yisrael always refer exactly to the same thing. But notice like in verse 7, okay, he says, and he took up this proverb and said, Balak, the sovereign of Moab, has brought me from Aram, from the mountains of the east. Come curse Yaakov for me and come rage against Israel. See, the key is not looking at Yaakov and Israel. He's talking about cursing and raging. We're supposed to be paying attention to the other piece. Okay? He says, I want you to curse and I want you to rage against this people. And so he says, it's kind of to give a deeper understanding or more full answer. So we see this again in 23:23 when he says, for there is no sorcery against Yaakov, nor is there any divination against Israel. For it is said to Yaakov and to Israel, what is thou done? Okay? So you see how that can, again, he's giving you more deep understanding. There's no sorcery or divination against Yaakov, okay, and in Israel. So you see, he said the same thing twice, but he added each time something a little bit different. Sorcery and divination are similar, but they're not the exact same thing. Raging and cursing are similar in some ways, but not the same thing. And so he's kind of giving us more to chew on. Instead of saying, I just don't want you to curse or rage against Israel. It has more impact to say, I don't want you cursing Yaakov or raging against Israel. It's just the way he likes to put things across. And you see this a lot in Scripture. Okay? Yahweh says the same thing, but you have to look for what's different. The slight different thing has to do with raging versus cursing, or in the other case, divination and sorcery. Okay?
That's all the questions I had for 23. The next ones are for 25.
Oh, well, I got more stuff in 24. Actually, I've got stuff in 22 even. Okay, go for your stuff in 25, and then I'll cover whatever doesn't get covered.
Aaron Sullivan would like to know, chapter 25, verse 7, was the plague mentioned here, the judgment of death in 25:5? Was that rescinded after Pinchas' action? Or is the plague something else, illness, that's not really explained here?
Okay, 25:7 is Pinchas with the spear. Okay, the plague is then mentioned in 8 and 9. Okay, so that was the plague. Okay, so the plague, he's talking about the plague. It's not like there was an actual plague. They were told to kill all those who stood up, stood for Baal Peor. And so that slaughter ceased once Pinchas put an end to it and made a stand. Yahweh was waiting for a stand to be made. And what the plague was people making the stand for Baal, for Baal Peor. And the people stopped doing that when they realized, who is Pinchas anyway? Pinchas was the child of the high priest. He was the next in line to be high priest. Actually, he becomes high priest. And he gets blessed for what he does. We'll see that next week. Okay, so Pinchas, son of Eleazar, the priest, the son of Aaron, the priest. This is the high priest line. Now, these guys dropped the ball. They didn't actually do anything to stop this. It says, when Pinchas, son of Eleazar, and son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he rose up and said, enough of this. And he took his spear and put it right through them. Okay, next question.
Pete Lamb would like to know, in chapter 25, what is the significance of it being a Midianite woman with the men of Israel? Also, what was the plague that was ended?
Well, okay, think about a plague as something that passes through a body of people and kills them. Okay, in this case, it was those with swords who were told to go kill those who stood with Baal Peor. But this is still like a plague. Okay, something that went through the body and started killing. All right, from that point of view. The other thing was, as far as the Midianite woman, look, what was happening was in trying to, and this is linked in other places to Balaam, okay? In trying to curse Israel, he failed the 3 times that he tried it. And there seems to be a connection that he ended up really cursing them by sending the foreign women in there and having the foreign women lead them into paganism. Okay, so this is where we have the problem, okay? And so what was happening in verse 6 is that there was a guy, one of the children of Israel, who was doing an in-your-face, Moses, Aaron, and the rest of you. I'm going to just take this woman and I'm going to take her right to my tent, and I don't care what any of you think. You don't have authority over me. And that's when Pinchas says, I don't think so. Okay? Now bear in mind, this is important. None of you get to be Pinchases on Facebook or YouTube and start spearing everybody thinking it's your job to stop the craziness. Okay, he was anointed and appointed. He had the lineage and he was actually to become priest, high priest. It was his job, in other words, his responsibility to step up and do this. This is key. You do not have the authority and right to try to be a Pinchas and start spearing everybody on public, in the, social media. So knock that off. Don't do that. Or I may have to pull out my spear. Okay? It's wrong. It's not for you to do. There's a mess out there. We are not a cohesive nation in Israel, in the land, so to speak. This was a plague going through the body of Israel that needed to be stopped. And it wasn't the first one. It's not the last one. Okay, we had a plague, didn't we, last week? Rabbi Tom led it last week, and we had a plague. They're doing real well in the wilderness, aren't they? Okay? And so there's a lot of that going on still today, but we do not just have the right to start thinking we're Pinchas. Okay? So please stop doing that. All right. That doesn't mean you don't stand strong in your beliefs. It doesn't mean that if needed, if someone asks, and you're talking about something, you can give correction in some way, but it's not your job to go spearing. Remember, this guy with this woman didn't ask for anything. He was just going to do his thing. Pinchas took it upon himself to go and do this. You don't get to do the same thing. Not under the situations we have now. We are not a cohesive group and a cohesive nation. All right? I might need to spear somebody here in the congregation or in the group that's our group because it's our group. If there's a situation going on and put an end to it, if it's becoming a plague in the congregation. Hasn't happened in my experience, but certainly that's something that could happen. But in general, this stuff is going on Facebook to people you don't even know. Pinchas knew this guy. He was part of the children of Israel. There was a relationship there. He was part of the Kohanim, the high priest line. And so there's a whole different situation. Please You're going to embarrass your Heavenly Father. He's not done with these people yet. He's working their walk with them just like he's working your walk with you. Let them walk out their own salvation in fear and trembling, as Paul tells us in Philippians 2:12. Don't take it upon yourself. Okay, next question or point.
Okay, Olivier, 25:8. Was the plague stopped because a righteous leader put a stop in the idolatry being committed by the people of Israel?
Yes. Yah was waiting for somebody. Remember it says in other places, he was looking for a man to stand in the breach. Okay, and he found none. Well, here he's looking for a man to stand in the breach, and Pinchas stands up. He's our hero. Okay, he stood up. We have other places where he's looking for a man to stand in the breach, and nobody stands up. Okay, Ezekiel 22:30. Okay, well, we're going to verse 29, actually. The people of the land have practiced oppression and committed robbery and have wronged the poor and needy, and they oppressed the stranger without right ruling. And I sought for a man among them, a Pinchas, it doesn't say that, but that's what I'm thinking, who would make a wall and stand in the breach before me on behalf of the land that I not destroy it, but I didn't find one. Therefore I poured out my displeasure on them, and I consumed them with fire of my wrath, and I put their way on their own head. Let Yahweh have his vengeance. He'll put their way on their own head. Oh, but he wants someone to stand in the breach. No, he wanted specifically, remember, this condemnation starts in verse 25 with a condemnation of the people who were so-called prophets and priests. That's the problem. The leadership. All right, continue.
Okay, attached to that one, second half is how can we make sure we do not fall into idolatry? It says, chapter 25, Israel was joined to Baal Peor. Can you give us examples of idols in our lives?
Look, the main simple Peshat thing is anything you look at, worship, or believe to be Elohim. If you are looking to, as the Catholics do, all the saints, saint this and saint that, and Yeshua's mother Mary and all this other stuff, they're putting them in the place of Elohim. They even put Yeshua. Actually, that's a question that comes up a lot. I think it came up last week, Rabbi Tom, you mentioned this briefly, and someone I saw in the chat had wondered, well, are we not supposed to pray to Yeshua? No, we don't pray to Yeshua. Okay? We ask things in his authority. We pray to the Father. He gave us the model in Matthew. He says, our Father who art in heaven, right? We pray to the Father. Who did he pray to? The Father. He says, whatever you ask in my authority, the Father will do. Okay? So let's be careful with that. So even those in Christianity have turned into idolaters in that they worship and they pray to, etc., the Son when the Son doesn't want that. He wants us to worship the Father, pray to the Father. Does that make sense? Are we good on that? Okay? Okay.
And last question actually goes, the only question I've gotten so far regarding chapter 23. In chapter 23, are they sacrificing to Baal but talking to Yahweh? The last verse in chapter 22, verse 41 says they were on a high place of Baal.
Well, okay, so this has to do with that mixing. I think he was still trying to impress Yahweh, but he's not going to impress Yahweh doing it on a high place of Baal. Okay? But he was still trying to impress Yahweh. But the idea is also, he's like, Balak is trying to impress Balaam. Don't you see how big this group is? Okay, which then now opens me up to some of the comments I wanted to make that aren't in here yet that nobody made, so we're going to cover them now. So in chapter 22, okay, right there at the beginning, okay, we see in verse 5 that they knew that this group came out of Mitzrayim. So remember Moses earlier on said, don't kill them because people know you brought them out of Mitzrayim? They knew. Because verse 5 says, see, a people has come from Mitzrayim. So this is being said to Balaam. So Balak knew. The Moabites knew exactly what this was. Okay? So that's an important thing. But also we have in, let's see, verse 3 of chapter 22. And Moab was exceedingly afraid because the people were many. The world is afraid of us when we're many. Did any of you catch that? Maybe if you heard me last year when I said it. Okay? The world is going to react as Balak is reacting with the Moabites, as Egypt reacted to the Israelites. When we are many, we scare the world. Not because we do anything to intimidate or scare them. They are afraid of what we stand for and what we are doing because it threatens what they are doing. It threatens their delusion bubble. Okay, so they become afraid of us because we're many. Now, we're not many, but as we grow, people will take notice of us. When they take notice of us, if they choose to be afraid. We do not make them afraid. We are not to do anything to make them afraid. He said, just the fact that they were many made him exceedingly afraid. Look at them. Look at how many there are. Isn't that the same thing Pharaoh said? Pretty much. And by the way, this is the same thing they said in Germany, the same thing they said in Russia, the same thing they said in Spain, and other places that they attacked the Jewish communities. Look at them. Look at how many they are. And also, look what he says. He says, they eat everything up. They're licking up all that is around us. Oh, the Jews, they control everything. They're licking up everything around us. They're taking up all the resources. This is the same finger pointing that's going on all the way through and all the way to today. Nothing has changed. Okay? Okay, so that was a couple of points in 22. Did I answer the one thing from 23 for you? Okay. Let's see, I've got something else here. I don't know why I wrote that verse in my notes. I'm just trying to see some of the ones that are in my notes and see why I wrote it because I'm kind of scanning down. Okay, I want to stir up trouble here because I haven't yet. Actually, I probably have already. Okay, I tried to say this. I'm only stirring it up because I want to see if this experiment fails or works. Okay? I've said in the past, and you can take the challenge if you want, but nowhere in the Hebrew is the phrase Ruach HaKodesh. And I've had people do radio shows on YouTube saying mocking me, how I say there's no Holy Spirit in the Old Testament. I didn't say that. I'm just saying the phrase that we use doesn't exist in the Hebrew. It exists in lots of other ways, like in chapter 24 and in verse 2. It says the Spirit of Elohim. In Hebrew, that's Ruach Elohim. So I'm not saying the Spirit of Elohim is not in the Old Testament. I just found it fascinating that in all my studies, the phrase that we use, which is not proper Hebraic phrase, the way we would, it just doesn't exist there, called the Ruach HaKodesh. That Holy Spirit is not mentioned in that phrase. So please hear me clearly. I'm not saying the Holy Spirit is in the Old Testament. I've taught millions of times that it's all over the place. That Caleb and Joshua had a different spirit. That the spirit that was on Moses then gets shared because he had the Ruach HaKodesh. I'm just saying that when people take, you know what, I can show you right in here where it says the Spirit of God or the Spirit of Elohim or in Psalms and in millions of other places. Yes, but it doesn't actually say Ruach HaKodesh. Okay? Just an interesting thought. Now, I'm not against anything. It's just I just thought that was interesting. So you can go and do the research and prove me wrong. That's fine. I've not seen the verse. But that's not to say anything negative about the Ruach HaKodesh being in the Tanakh. We see it flowing in Genesis chapter 1. It's just not called the Ruach HaKodesh. It's called Ruach Elohim. Okay? And so this is just an interesting thing I threw out there. So I just wanted to put that out there just because I haven't stirred the pot enough. Well, it's in my notes, so I figure if it's in my notes, I should say it, right? Let's see if there's anything else in here. Okay, in verse 4 of chapter 25, it says, take all the leaders of the people and hang them up before Yahweh. Then this guy goes and says, we can assume that the man of Israel is a leader, that one that has the Midianite woman. That would be a logical conclusion because they were told to go hang up all the leaders, and this guy's like, oh yeah, right in your face. So this is also why killing him made that much more difference. It's likely he was a leader, okay, the one that gets killed here. All right? Okay, here it is in verse 14. We're going to see next week. He was Zimri, son of Salu, a leader of the father's house among the Shimonites. So he's a leader. Okay? So that kind of explains why it's so significant that this one person happens to be doing this right in everybody's face. And by the way, she was a leader too. The Midianite woman. Cosbi, the daughter of Tsur. He was the head of the people of her father's house in Midian. These were leaders. So it was a big deal when he killed both of them. A little preview for next week. Okay? Did you guys still want the mic over here? Okay, the mic wants to come this way, but go ahead. Okay, go that way first? Okay, let's go. I stirred it up and our hands all started flying.
I just had a thought as you were talking about there's no Hebrew phrase, Ruach HaKodesh. And the thought was maybe Father ordered it that way because HaKodesh means set apart, which could imply a third person. So
Could be.
I just had that thought. But
Which is, by the way, why the Jews have never thought of it being a separate person, the Ruach Elohim. Okay?
in chapter 25, twice it used the words, thus Yisrael was joined to Baal Peor. I haven't really made note of that anywhere else, that particular wording, but I did find, looking up, there is a midrash, or I was looking up the names used here, and Baal Peor is a very obscene title. It's a play on words, is what I found out, and so this was really not just bowing down or having teraphim in your house that will bless your crops or something like that. This was really obscene debauchery that was going on.
Yep.
So, I just, lest someone think that Yahweh was being harsh to just hang up the leaders in the sun.
Oh, no, they were this was very sexually related, worship. And by the way, that's paganism has gone on throughout all the centuries, that where with the paganism comes, sexual acts as part of the worship. Okay? And that you see going on all the way through. And it's still places done today. Candace?
Okay, I have a couple of things. Yahweh is extremely patient. He's extremely patient. Besides reading this Torah portion, I've also been reading in the book of Judges, and it seems like there is a dance that Yahweh does with the children of Israel. He goes in, he rescues them. They wait a little while, and then they fall into worshiping other gods. They're into paganism. And the thought that came to me, and I know you've probably heard this before, those who forget the past are sure to repeat the past. So I think the children of Israel kept forgetting the great and wondrous works that Yahweh had done for them, and they just kept falling back into sin. It's like they were expecting, they wanted all these wonderful things to keep going on. And you find that I know when I was in the United Pentecostal Church, everybody's looking for these signs and stuff. And this one church in Louisiana that I attended, they had like stardust and feathers falling, and everybody was making like, this is from Yahweh, this is from God, And I said, well, there's nothing in the Bible that shows the feathers and gold dust were part of Yahweh's plan. Nowhere. It's just kind of really hokey. But that is kind of, anyway. Another thing that crossed my mind is these women must have really been very good-looking women, because weren't there women in the Israelite camp that these men could have attached themselves to? No, they went after these other women. So these women must have been very alluring. Maybe they dressed scantily or whatever it was that was causing these Israelites to turn their hearts toward these women and unite in paganism with them, which brings it home to how often, we as believers, we can be turned on by the looks of somebody or their smooth words, and they can sweep us away if we're not careful. Oh, this person is so gorgeous, and this person's not even walking with God. He's living for the world. His whole life's about the world. So I see that, being a single woman now, that I have to be really careful because, people could, a man could just talk really nice, and I could be very infatuated if I'm not careful. Or he could look very good, and I'm like, the lust genes are coming out of me. So I see the lust genes, yeah. Hey, my lust genes.
I was going to say that actually, but
But it's easy to fall into sin if you're not careful.
Amen.
And, being a single woman, and after I got mikvah, and I was going to come to you, Rabbi, and you brought it to me before I come to you, that anybody that I'm going to date or whatever, I have to bring them to my papa for approval. So that's an extra layer of protection.
Amen. Amen. Okay, just to clarify for those watching out there, that's not a rule in our group where people have to come to me for approval. It's something that I am doing for Candace as part of our relationship and my covering and helping her as a single woman, and just to help her have that layer of protection. That's an agreement we have, okay? I don't want you thinking this is some sort of weird cultist place where everybody's got to go through the rabbi. They do not have to do that. We have this agreement, the two of us, and that provides her with comfort knowing that gives her that extra layer of protection, okay? All right. Okay, Rabbi Tom?
Thank you. You were talking about the phrase Ruach HaKodesh. Another thing that people, I think, misuse and misconstrue, a lot of people, you hear them say the Shekinah glory. And
right.
the Shekinah is not really in the scriptures. It's not in the Bible. It's not even a Hebrew word. But from what I understand, it's a Ugaritic word. So I don't know how that. Am I right on that?
I'd have to go back and look that up. And, my brain is wrapped around this Torah portion at the moment.
I'm
so
sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Okay. But, this whole idea of, I tell the story all the time when people in the churches are all talking about how his presence fell, and they get excited about what they think they know, what the Shekinah, the Shekinah glory, how they pronounce it, and they'll say how it fell in their churches. I always tell them the same thing. No, it didn't. Like, how do you know? You weren't there. Blah. I say, because you're breathing. Okay? The Shekinah, the true full presence of Yah, if it came to this building now, would kill all of us. None of us is tahor according to the requirements that would have. That would be the presence like it was over the mercy seat. Okay? And so I've been to places where people actually prayed for that to come. And I was with a few people there, and I said, if you see or feel anything, run. And run quickly. Interesting story. So I was invited to a group to witness, I don't know why I was invited, but there were people that I was possibly going to be their rabbi at some point. They wanted me to kind of see where their background was and where they were from. And so I got invited to a conference, and I was put in a room to come and attend this conference one weekend. And it was really, the guy said he was Hebrew roots, but I think that all that meant was he liked Jews and he liked Israel. There wasn't any Torah to be had. He was a former Orthodox Jew, and anyway. But it was at some point, it was a very charismatic group. All the people except 4 or 5 of us went up to the front of the room, and apparently every year something happens and they all fall out all over the place or something. I don't know. It didn't happen that year. Now, Bear in mind that earlier in the conference, we were told that this is a very open and free place. If you feel led to blow the shofar or do whatever, you could do whatever you feel led to do. And it was a leaders' conference. So I had my shofar with me, and I'd been blowing it as freely as I felt necessary to pierce through all the nonsense that was happening there. And so they're all up at the front. They'd already had someone sing a Shekinah song, and it was all about the Shekinah and the glory. And then they're all sitting there praying and waiting for it to fall on them in the front of the room. And that's when I turned to the 2 or 3 people who happened to be with me, also there to kind of observe. And I said, hey, if you see anything or feel anything, run. And then we're standing there, and all of a sudden, and now here's the funny part. I would have thought somebody would either started it, sparked it, or faked it or something. Nothing happens. And we're talking about 5 minutes of just standing. That's a long time to just stand and wait for something. It was at least 5 minutes, maybe 10. And we're all just standing around watching, waiting. And then finally somebody on the microphone said, there must be a restraining spirit in here. I'm sorry. Actually, no, I'm not sorry. You know. Now, they didn't all turn and look at me, although I wouldn't have cared, but you know, those of you who know me, I would have been like, what do you want from me? You guys are praying death on yourselves. What is wrong with you? Okay? You're going to be that dumb. Of course, I'm trying to protect you. Foolish people. And I wanted to say to the Orthodox guy, I said, you should know better. Former Orthodox Jewish guy who didn't know what he was talking about. So anyway, so that was one of those fun stories. It was really a funny moment. But I mean, they looked all confused because they couldn't even like spark it and fake it. That's how restrained it was. I mean, I kept thinking, surely somebody at some point is going to ignite this thing by just falling out or doing whatever it is they're expecting, and then they'll all do it, right? Nothing. So they just stopped and went on. Everybody went back to their seats, and they kept going with the rest of the meeting. I mean, you know, it was just... So that's the first time I saved over 50 people's lives. Okay, so actually it was probably like 100 people in that room. But anyway, now they should have noticed there's only like 5 of us or 3 of us who didn't go up front. You know, so, excuse me. All right. Where's the mic? You got another one? Last one, and then I got like one little thing after this. Go ahead. Maybe.
25:4, leadership. Moshe took care of the other leaders and judges, then took care of the people. Can you discuss the difference between the leaders and judges in the context of organizations?
All right, so, excuse me. The leaders of the people and the judges. Because in verse 4 it says leaders, and then Moshe says to the judges, verse 5, each one go slay his men. Now, by leaders of the people, okay, these are the ones, we could go one or two ways with this. Again, we only have these 2 verses to go on. So you're forcing me to speculate, okay? So what I believe, I'm feeling whatever, I just feel like this is the idea, okay? By the leaders of the people, these are the people's leaders, as opposed to the ones that Moses appointed, the heads of thousands, heads of hundreds, heads of tens, etc. The judges would be his leaders. Okay? These are the leaders of the people, the people's leaders, who were leading them towards Baal Peor. So take all of those guys and hang them up. Okay? And then the judges are his leaders, the heads of thousands and hundreds, etc., that he put in place. That's a guess. So it makes sense to me, kind of fits the situation. Okay? So how does that work in a congregation? In congregations, guess what? There's some popular people in the congregation that people look towards. They're not the leadership, though. That could be a problem if those guys start leading you in a direction that's not the direction of the actual leadership that's anointed and appointed in the group. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay? Okay. Eliadah wants the mic. I'm kidding. All right. You going to come up and get the mic? No, he's not going to come up. All right. So in chapter 24, and in verse 17, it says, I see him, but not now. I observe him, but not near. A star shall come out of Yaakov, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab, and destroy all the sons of Shet. And this is? Who is that? David HaMelech. It's pointing at King David. Okay, again, think about all the things David did and what he did to the Moabites, etc. You can see that this could be David HaMelech. Okay? Doesn't say it, my speculation, but it fits in. Okay, a scepter, a star that's going to smite the corners of Moab and destroy all the sons of Shet. Okay? David HaMelech. King David. All right, let's see. Is that it? I think it's certainly enough to be it. This is one, let's see, 23. There was something else I saw earlier in my notes. Now I don't remember what it was. That I wanted to say something, and then we got sort of distracted. And I'm trying to think if I can see it in my notes real quickly here. 24. Okay, yes, this one. Okay, so in 24:11, well, actually, let's look at 10. The displeasure of Balak burned against Balaam, and he struck his hands together. And Balak then said to Balaam, I summoned you to curse my enemies, and see, you've kept on blessing them these 3 times. And now flee to your place, because I said I would greatly esteem you, and see, Yahweh has kept you back from esteem. See, he's trying to tell him, look, I was going to give you glory and honor. And Yahweh's the problem. He has kept you from all that. Okay? Be careful. People might offer you all kinds of glory. Oh, I'm going to make you my best man at my wedding on Shabbat. I'm going to give you the honored place, my maid of honor. I'm sorry, but I can't go beyond the word of Yahweh. I'm going to give you this, we're going to give you a big chance to be the speaker at something or do some other honoring, glorifying, something that's going to get you, notice and accolades, but it's going to break Torah to do it. Well, what do you want? You want to be esteemed by Yahweh? You want to be esteemed by man? Think about it. If I work on Saturdays, I'll probably get a raise and a new position at my job, and my boss told me to promote me. Yeah, but Yahweh will demote you. And you don't want to be where he's going to demote you. And I'm not talking about some, burning forever in hell. I'm just saying he's going to kick you right out of the camp. Remember, when your sin cuts you off. That's why you have to make teshuvah to get back into alignment with him. You have to make teshuvah. You got to repent, and you got to turn around and get back in line with the covenant that you had made. Amen? All right, I think that's going to cover it. And I think the main point to remember at the end of all this is to remind yourself that you should be literally unable to go beyond the word of Yahweh. Okay, who wants to close us in prayer? Well, Owen, you got the mic, might as well do it. Let's get the camera over there.
Father, we thank you for your Torah, Father, your instructions, your anointed, appointed Father, who is able to decipher for us, explain it to us, Father. I pray, Father, that you please develop in all of us a desire, Father, a will, the integrity, Father, to always say, sorry, but I cannot go beyond the word of Yahweh. And cause us, Father, to put to death through a spear, Father, everything in ourselves, Father, that doesn't look like Yeshua. That when we look at a mirror, Father, the first one that we want to address and the only one is ourselves, the person we're looking right in the mirror, Father. That we might be told, Father, at the end of the race, and help us endure, Father, all the way to the end, and be told, well done, good and trustworthy servant. We thank you, Father, for our brothers and sisters joining us on the live stream, for the mishpacha that is present here, for our rabbi, your anointed, appointed over us, Father. help us to listen and do to what the words that come out of his mouth, because those are the words that you're speaking through him. In Yeshua's mighty name and authority. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Excellent. All right. I almost wanted to just show you my papers. So this is what you guys need to be doing at here and at home, is when you're listening to Torah study, you should be scribbling down, whatever, things to comment on or questions to make. Did you get that? Yeah. Right? Marty, you got that? Okay. I mean, this is what I do. And by the way, every year I keep the same sheet, but I add to it. I mean, as I'm listening, I look to see if sometimes I write the same thing down more than once because I can't find where I already wrote it. But I have to see what hits me. What am I gleaning? I want to look at it fresh every time. I don't have typed out written notes that I've kept all the time. And, now I may at some point add these into something typewritten, but I'm still going to have the pen every time I listen to write something new. And so you should be open and ready to receive what he wanted you to see and hear and be able to write that down, because maybe there was something you don't comment about or raise it up as a public question, but you needed to see it and you know what it is and you wrote it down for yourself because it hit you and it didn't need to be spoken out loud, but it was just for you. So I want to encourage you that this is what I do. I don't want you to think, well, he just studied all week and prepared for himself and had all these notes and everything. No, actually, the reason it's hard for me to find stuff is because as I scribble it down each year, I got some stuff from chapter 22 at the top of the page, and I got other stuff from 22 on the bottom of the page. Because another year, I recognize something else that I didn't say or think to make a comment about. And so I got comments all over this. Sometimes I have to go to a second sheet or on the back. But every time, I'm going to be writing new stuff and make sure that whatever pops up, pops up. And that's something you should be doing as well. Do that at home when you study. And then the things that you don't know or don't understand, then that's when you call and ask questions. Or you bring them with you when you ask questions. Especially if it's a Torah portion thing. When we get to that Torah portion, you'll have your chance to ask those questions. Okay? All right. So with that, if anybody wants to come up here, we'll go do a little wave goodbye thing. By the way, for all those who have not seen the video, The Legend of the Coin, it'll explain everything, somewhat.
I feel like you say that every time.
I don't say it every time.
Yeah, you do.
No.
Every time someone does that legend.
The Legend of the Coin. I don't say it every time. I say it enough. Okay. All right. Okay, we got everybody up here. Is everybody on camera? We got them all in? Okay. Okay, we're going to wish everybody a good night. We're going to say Laila Tov, Shavua Tov, and tell them how much we love them. Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Laila Tov, Shavua Tov. We love you.
Hi, Stephen. Miss you.
All right. Good night. Blessings to everyone.